As for Muslim men, what we have to do is to tell our women, this civil war is none of your business.
Right.
You have an extended family. You have men that are willing to look after you. You have a structure that's in place. This war is not your business, because our men want you to be virgins. We don't want to run after a whole bunch of women and work on them and find the right one after sexually experimenting with them. That's not what we want. We are expected as men to be virgins when we get married, just like you are. We're expected to be. So this war that's happening, it's not your business, and it's not my business. We have to turn our attention away from these qudwa and start looking at the qudwas of Islam.
And the sources for role models in Islam, it's the same for men and women in the religion.
It's the exact same. It's the exact same. And so people will say, well, what about, because in women in Islam, there aren't many role models for women and everything else. No, there are. You just don't want those role models. That's all. It's the same thing as the men. You've created an artificial crisis.
Right.
That there are no role models. Fatima Zubayriya, who wrote a mukhtasar on Dalil al-Talib, she's a female. I have her kitab. It's got beautiful ta'liqat on it. But you don't want that. You are looking for something to where they have to be on par and equal to men, or they have to be greater than men. And that's just not going to happen by and large most of the time, because women have different responsibilities and obligations that they're pursuing. So it's not going to be all of one way or every way all the time. And that's why you're saying there aren't any good ones, because you're assuming that it has to be exactly like the structure that you've been given, because again, you're chasing Bacchus and Mammon. And now some of these women are definitely mushriks associating partners with Allah, because they've gone headlong into it. They have to make tawbah and come back to Islam. Some of them are not. Some of them are just ignorant and everything else. But but still, nonetheless, whether they're mushriks associating partners with Allah and they have to make tawbah and come back into Islam, or they are not, they've been injured by this structure. And it's a structure that's not their business. It's a structure where there's already things that are in place for them. Yet they're falling into all these new issues and these new battles, which really they don't have to. Right? They don't have to. But again, this is only being done because how many families are there where there's an older daughter and the men in the family told the daughter to go get a job and work, and they laid off the menfolk. So the daughter now is told to focus on her education, focus on her work, and they don't have her focus on her. It's not, that's men telling them that.
Right.
You need to be able to get a job so you don't have to depend. So you don't have to depend on a man. A man told her that. Well, her mother told her. Okay, then a man told her mother.
Right,
that.
Absolutely.
That's what happened. Because those ideas where women are in their normal character and going about their business are not forming those sort of ideas. They don't have those combative conversations. Women have their own conditions and their own affairs. That's not those are artificial conversations that women have. And we know they're artificial because when you cross-examine women about it, they can't give you a cogent response on why that is, because those aren't their ideas.
Yes.
That's why they can't give you a cogent response.
It's like a lot of these videos, they show videos where they supposedly trap women when they can't respond why they believe in a certain thing. But this is then the cause, obviously.
Yeah, because those are not their ideas.
No,
and it makes sense why they would be stumped like that and everything else. It's not because they are, oh well, we caught them. Did you catch them, or did you actually expose yourself instead?
Allah.
Because you might have exposed yourself.
Allah.
You didn't expose them, because again, they are the products of popular culture.
Wow.
That's what they are. They're the products of popular culture as ladies. And they know that they are. And then when you start asking them all these questions about the world that you built, that's not their fault. You built this reality. They didn't build it. You built it. Now you're angry with them for following through. Well, didn't they do well then? Then when they're raising your children up and telling the children the same thing, well, what do you want to happen? Because listen, you're both gone from the house. You start taking the kids to nursery and everything when they're young. Because you said that we both need to work to maintain a lifestyle that both of you don't need to follow. But you insist that you have to maintain this lifestyle where you've taken amenities, which are basic, which amenities and necessities are two different things. You've taken amenities, which are additional things, and you've lifted amenities to the level of necessities. So now you think you need these amenities. You think that every 2 years you have to have a new car. Yeah, that this one's the old version. So every 2-3 years you trade it in. You know, some families used to have the same car for 20 years, 15 years. Yeah, we needed a new one. Trade it in. Well, that costs money. So then when it falls apart and the laws are still from the 50s, but you guys are trying to live in some type of new era 60, 70 years on, and you're angry about the laws are behind women. They're not behind women. The laws are still in the 50s. You are having a civil war between men. And because you're having a civil war between men, you've tried to move things ahead in the particular country that you're in, but the legal structure hasn't moved forward because it's still held according to the time where a woman who might be working or have a side work around the house or outside of the place or arts and crafts, or she might go to night school, is still going to be around the children more than the man is going to be. So if a divorce happens, that woman's going to go back for their extended family. But you've told those women that they don't need to do that and they need to focus on work. So they're both working. Well, when they're out of the house, if the woman gets divorced, there's no extended family to go back to. Why? Because that woman's mother is out of the house. So who's going to be at home? Not her father, because father's out of the house. And if her parents are married and they're older because you've gotten married later, their parents might be so old they can't physically look after the kids anymore. Or they might be so old because, again, they started telling men, you need to retire and move away from your children. It's time for you to live your life. You're done raising children. So now her parents have moved away across the country or somewhere else. So even if she wants to go home, she can't. Or they bought a smaller house that's only 1 bedroom. You know, parents used to buy a house where they still had a good number of bedrooms. So when parents or grandchildren want to visit, they've got some place to stay. Well, no, the parents have now bought like a 1-bedroom house.
Yeah.
And they'll tell their kids, you can't come here.
Exactly.
The problem happens. They tell them you can't come here. But men told them that. You want to retire and play golf.
Yes.
You want to retire and play golf.
Exactly. So weird.
You want to travel the world and sail. So now they've gone and bought a sailboat. So now you can't even find your parents.
Allahu Akbar.
Can't call them. You go to the dock. Yeah, I'm looking for boat number 27. Oh yeah, they took off for Ashland, Oregon. They're gonna dock up in Astoria and then head to Roseland. They should be back probably about 2 weeks. That's what he said. Oh man, you got both your kids holding your hands.
Yeah.
I'm going through a really messy divorce, and I need somewhere to stay to clear my head.
Bizarre.
Now you can't clear your head. You can't go to the parents' house where there's a possibility of the marriage breaking down, where the husband comes, and once he walks in, obviously the parents of the girl are like, what's going on? Now you can sit down and talk and say, listen, she needs to go back home with you. But listen, I don't want to go home. Why? This is the father of your children. You're a family. You're married. You need to, they can't happen because the extended family's gone. But women didn't say it should be gone. Since when did women have control over the extended family? Women have control over the sex, not the family. It's men that have control over the extended family. They're the ones that decide. So they told them, you don't need an extended family. You need to get out there. You got to start working, man. We got 2 incomes coming in the house. Right. That means if we buy this house, okay, in 20 years we'll remortgage it. Buy enough. So then you started getting guys into the thing of remortgaging now. You know, before, men, when they be at home, again, here as well as in UK as well as in the US, they get married. Sometimes they'd have an enclosure or an area alongside of or in the house. And a man would build up and put his money together. And the family of the bride or the family of the guy or both of them will come together and create the equity for them to buy their first house outright. Outright. But now men have told other men, no, man, you need to get on the proper ladder now. And the way to do it is to create equity by using debt as money. So now men are using debt as money, taking a qudwa from another man, using debt as currency. So they have a house, they're mortgaging it 10, 12 years in. They say, okay, let me remortgage it and use that to buy another house. So now they're doubly in the hole in mortgages, and now they're 40 years in. But the thing is, for something like that, you can't have sick days, you can't be unemployed for too long, you can't get fired, because the bank will be breathing on you. This is men's business. Men did this. Men created the modern popular culture. You don't get to say that men created Microsoft, they created the aeronautics program, but they didn't create modern society. Who did it?
Right.
Women. How? If we let you tell the story, they were all locked up at home with their feet, with their ankles swollen, pregnant with no pads. That's what you tell us.
Exactly.
So then how did they get outside? You told them to get out there during a war in Europe. We need you in the factories making bullets because you have small, thin little fingers, and you can work on the machines and everything else. So they did. They listened to you. You told them. They said, we need you to. And the lady said, okay, we'll do it.
And then they also go into that whole bizarre idea of the system, the matrix, and all of these fancy terms where people are
all of it is a cop-out to avoid the responsibility.
Right.
Because they'll say, well, there's a matrix. It's the women in the matrix. What matrix? What matriarchy? Show me one institution where women are controlling the Supreme Court of the United States, or the European Court of Human Rights, or the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. I want to find these women, this gynocracy. They keep calling it a gynocracy where the vagina is just ruling. Where? Because every matriarchy through history has collapsed in on itself. Where's there a matriarchy here? I'm looking for it. I'm trying to find it.
No.
It doesn't exist. Just listen. The Matrix was a good trilogy of films. That's all it was.
Right.
They were films. They don't exist. People have taken this thing where they're calling people red pillars and blue pillars and orange pillars. None of this stuff is real. Just like I remember when the Star Wars franchise came out, people were calling each other Ewoks. And listen, this stuff is fake. Listen, if you like movies, that's fine. Enjoy it for what it was. It was a movie series. It had some interesting metaphors, some things you can take away. But it is not a reflection of current society. Right. If you live your society by the Matrix, you're a fool. You're an utter and complete fool. Just like when the Zeitgeist, when that came out, people were swearing that that's how the world was according to the Zeitgeist. Listen, it's an interesting documentary, okay? It is. Some of his thoughts on 9/11, everything else, it's interesting. But you don't live your life by it. Well, what about the documentary Loose Change? It's an interesting documentary. You don't live your life by a movie or a documentary.
Right.
You just don't. You have to be intelligent. But Muslim brothers have let themselves get into this stuff with talking about matrices and this deep in the system and the wormhole and the agents are after you and all this other stuff. No. There's no agents. There's no matrix. It's just this. Shaitan is the enemy of the human race. Okay? There's some people that follow Shaitan, and they're part of a movement to attack the rest of the human race, which that other side is being led by the prophets, and their successors are the other righteous people that come after them. That's the story of the human mission. That's it.
No.
If anything of what you were saying was true, it would have been prophesied and given to us, because something of what you're talking about some worldwide matrix that encompasses everyone and everyone's going to be fitted with an RFID chip. If that was true, there would have been numerous ahadith about it. Now, I don't say that I have encyclopedic understanding, but I did 26 durus, perhaps, on the signs of the end of time. And in the research for those, I didn't find any of the Muraji or big elders mentioning anything about RFID chips or any of that stuff. Just saying. If someone finds it, let me know about a worldwide conspiracy where Jews are running the world and there's RFID chips and you can't buy and sell unless you get your hand or your head scanned, and it's going to be in your forehead. And I just show me where it is so I can follow it. Then I'll follow it. But until such time, knock it off. Because it's only something that's going to lead you down the path.
And this brings me to also one point. when you point out all of these things, some people raise the argument that they take the benefit from these kafir speakers, businessmen, or psychologists. But what we need to address here is a ruling on taking benefit about some of the worldly affairs, but then also shouldn't be impacting your religion or contradict it.
Yeah, we have to be careful because listen, if someone is showing me how to do conic functions and conic equations, I don't have any problem with that. I have no problem with that. Math is universal. Math is universal. Alhamdulillah. But when we start talking about other stuff where we're
taking
benefit from them and things like this, where it starts to shape what you have in your knowledge, that should not be followed.
Right.
That should not be followed. And people say, well, you can't take their technology or take any benefit except that you're influenced by their culture. Okay, so then why did the Muslims that landed in Egypt continue to use the Roman aqueduct culture? Did they all start wearing togas and start becoming Roman?
Right.
No.
Indeed.
Umar radiallahu anhu saw that the aqueducts worked well. And so he saw no reason to lay new sewage aqueducts. He said, they're working fine. Leave them as they are. If something's working and it's not harmful and it doesn't compromise the religion, then you leave it alone. And the same thing goes with that. No, but some of this goes back to how some Muslims view technology. And some Muslims are skeptical of all technology. Yes. And that's up to you. But don't project that on all other Muslims. If you, well, people should just avoid all the internet. No, you should, because you have a problem where you might have sexual avarice and you might slip. But that's not all Muslims. You have to look for the way the internet is not, I'm telling you, and we mentioned this before, we discussed this before. With respect to pornography, alhamdulillah, because of the internet, it's way safer now than it was when I was younger. When I was younger, pornography was foisted on you in a way that I can't begin to put into words. I told you about the time I accidentally walked into a pornography shop as a young child. Okay, I was a very young child. I didn't know, because to me, video stores were just video stores.
Right, yeah.
And in every video store, even the regular family-owned video stores, if it was a franchise that purchased a particular place, you'll walk in, and next to the action films, they might have films that just have the black case and they have the titles on them. And I remember, because I was told by one of my cousins to just go in and grab videotapes. So I did. I went, grabbed a whole bunch of videos. I thought, oh, this looks like an action film as well. It had something like The Invasion of Dallas or something like that. So I grabbed, oh, this is going to be great. Invasion of Dallas, because I thought some type of like monster movie, like an alien invasion or something. And I got it home, and my older sister, we were discussing what videos we're going to watch. Popcorn's popping, all these things are happening. And my sister says, what videos did you bring? And she's the eldest outside of my older brother, so I said, okay, listen, here's what I have. And she looked at all of them, and when she saw the one with the black label that had no picture on it, she said, no, not this one. Where'd you get this one? I said, oh, I just grabbed by the action section. She said, no. Whenever you see a video that just has the white border in the back and it doesn't have any picture and it's just a black box, never get that one. Those are no good. Okay, I had to learn that because it was everywhere. Porn was everywhere. When I went to the convenience store, porn was on the regular shelves with sports magazines. It was everywhere. To get involved with porn now, you have to go looking for it.
Yes.
I've never been so happy with regards to that mas'ala. Alhamdulillah, I've been so happy. Because the internet has actually made it to where you've got to go look for that stuff.
Yes.
It's not in your face anymore.
Because some people are like using this argument, oh, it's now everywhere, we can't avoid it argument.
Which to me, I'm wondering, because again, I come from the era where it really was everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm from that era. So you can't tell me about what was. I'm somewhere where the magazines from Sears and JCPenney's and Sears and Roebuck's, where my mother had to tell me stay away from pages 1379 to 1477, because the women were either completely naked or almost completely naked, because they were modeling bras and panties and other things, and they were bent over in suggested poses. Sometimes my mom had to tear those pages out. That's the era that I come from. You don't have to deal with that now. Now online, when you go on Amazon or whatever, it just shows the clothes standing straight up. That's it. Think about that, Akhi. You can go on Amazon where you're looking for a pair of pants and it just shows the pants stretched out. And then it says, click on to see actual size. You can see the actual size. You can see the hemline. There's no model modeling them most of the time. And even the models that are modeling them now, they're fully clothed, Akhi. That's the difference between my era and today. It's actually safer with regards to the porn stuff and everything else. It's probably safer. It's safer now than it was in my time for child abductions. I witnessed a friend of mine get abducted as a child, right? It's safer now with respect to abductions because of the fact that so many children have mobile phones, everything else. Someone snatches them, they get on the phone, they call, hey, listen, I'm being taken, or you can ping their phone. You couldn't ping when I was a kid. If you were gone, and you were dead. Now they snatch you, it's a different situation. So brothers have to understand this as well. If brothers have a Muslim brothers have a superstition about technology, whatever else, or they feel they can't deal with it, or it's a temptation for them, okay, don't you do it. But don't say that that's the hukum of all the qudwa of Islam, because it's not. And don't say that makes you a person of higher taqwa. That if you do it, or that's the people that are muttaqi that do it because you have a struggle with it. That's not true. That's just you that has a struggle with it.
Could you then clarify just this one issue where we're told to follow the first 3 generations, but then there's no issue? We don't have a contradiction here with technology and the like.
Okay. So when we're looking at technology following the first 3 generations, some people, and this was a later phenomenon in this current age, where there's people that believe that by following the first 3 generations, it means you have to destroy technology. So there's movements that have arisen within the past, within my lifetime, so past 40-something years, where they've like destroyed electricity and destroyed distribution centers that send out electricity. They've attacked like gas distribution centers that distribute gas because, these are signs of the end of time. Something being a sign of the end of time doesn't always mean it's bad. Just like, for example, there's a hadith in Bukhari where the Rasulullah said, before the end of time, there'll be a time where a woman will be able to travel with her mahram from Sana'a all the way up to the Hijaz without any worry or fear of her person. That's not good or bad. That's to do with being safe from like brigands and people along the way that would rob you and attack you or ravish you or rape you. That's neither good or bad. It's saying that the conditions will change such to where she won't have to be afraid. Not every sign of the end of time means something bad or good. It's telling you that there'll be changes. Not everything means bad or good. Just like the Sahih Bukhari, where it mentions that there'll be a Jew hiding behind a tree, come and kill you. There's some Muslims, they celebrate at that point. It's like that's not under the chapter of like celebrating things in Islam. No. It's a sign of something that's going to happen, because there'll be wars between Muslims and Jews where previous to that time there hadn't been. Think, other than the times of the Sahaba, up until the founding of Israel. So between the times of Sahaba and the founding of the state of Israel, what wars had there been between Jews and Muslims? Just think about it. So this is talking about a time where there would be some reason where there would be a war. That's what it's mentioning. It's nothing to do with something to celebrate or whatever else. Now, Muslims in the time of the first 3 generations took advantage of technology, for example, with the invention of the telescope. The fact that Imam Ahmed's time, there were 70 hospitals. Nobody said these have to be destroyed. There was cataract surgery in that time. So people were getting cataracts removed. There were detailed manuals that were written on cesarean sections. By the time of Imam Ahmed, Ibn al-Jahid had been alive. So by that time, you had the first books on zoology and also animal classification, human classification that had been done. Discussions on brain function, like all these types of things, lobotomies and other things had been examined and gone into. So no one has a problem with technology and just examining advances in technology. The scalpel was modified, because in that time scalpels had been there, but the scalpel, that the Muslims saw that the scalpel was too large to do more fine work on the brain or parts of the body when you did operations. So they made the scalpel much smaller. Now, from that time of 900 years or 1200 years ago up until now, the scalpel and most medical instruments have not changed with the exception of electricity. So instead of the cauterizing wand that was used in Imam Ahmed's time, which was a heated piece of steel, they now have what's called the cauterizing wand, which is electric, and you press it and it clicks and it forms a flame. That's it. They still cauterize wounds in the hospital. They just have what's called a cauterizing wand, and the cauterizing wand is white, plugs into a cord, which then plugs into a wall or is plugged into instrumentation, and it's an electric flame instead of the one that's been heated over fire. That's it. There's been very little change in medical science since the Muslims did the innovations. There were very little changes with the exception of the advent of electricity. That's it. Advent of electricity and computers. That's it. So we don't have a problem with technology in that sense. When we say follow the first 3 generations, it doesn't mean destroy your television, the internet, find the fiber optic cables at the bottom of the ocean, unplug them. That's not what that means. It means in their creed, fiqh, their akhlaq and adab, their muru'ah, those other affairs. Now, the things that are new that come after are subjected to those rulings.
Yes.
Okay, wait a minute. How does this fall in line with this? Okay, what does this mean with respect to this? And then we measure them according to those things.
Like, for example, one is in an airplane, so the distance where one can shorten a prayer. Can he do the salah sitting? So
yes. Yes, so all these types of things will be brought to pass, and we'll discuss these at length and try to get to the bottom of what the matter is. Or the fact that you had cosmonauts, 2 of which were Muslim. One was from the Soviet Union. Okay, now, how do you go about facing the Qibla with the Earth's movement and you're in a craft or a ship, right? How do you go about dealing with that? Because the Muslim cosmonaut had to deal with just that question. And it happened again to Bandar Abdul Aziz when he went in 1986 above the Discovery. He had to deal with just that issue. So they had to look at those fatwa, the discussion on wudu in a gravity less than 0 gravity environment, facing the Qibla. What does that mean when you're directly above the earth and it's moving? All these things have to be considered, right? And fatwa exist on these things, right? All of this stuff had been done. Advances in medicine where they were using the pig aorta's heart, which the valve has a very close sameness to the human heart. And then the advances in medical technology that were made to make the artificial one. Well, before that one, you just had the pig aorta, the permissibility of using that. Muhammad Mukhtar Shinqiti and other muraja gave rulings with respect to that, right? All of these things are considered, but they're built upon the ahkam and usul and rulings from the first 3 generations within one group of Sahaba that are built upon what comes to that we call the madhahib today. That's what all that's built around. And by understanding that, you understand that we don't have an issue with technology. We will have an issue with abuses in technology.
Right.
Our issue is abuses because for the circumnavigation of the globe, Muslims did that. For the advent of the telescope, Muslims did that. The binocular, Muslims did that. The issue is taking binoculars and using them to spy on someone in their window who's getting changed or whatever else. No, that's perversion. But the perversion is from you, not the actual item itself.
No.
The perversion is you, right? That's why the discussions when coffee was first brought, what does that mean? And what are the conditions of it? What's it being used for? Well, if coffee is being used for speakeasies and for other things that go with it, well, then you shouldn't be doing so because the environment that you're drinking coffee in is despicable, right? But it's hukum because it's a stimulant is best avoided, right? It's makruh, it's permitted, but it's best avoided,
right?
According to some fuqaha, right? Based upon other conditions, everything else. The rise of hashish into the Muslim world, which hashish was brought in by the Tatar, who consumed hashish similar to how people vape now. So it was a technological advancement. Well, what does hashish do? What is it? Okay, this is impermissible. Don't do that, right? All these things had to be considered.
No.
But although they hadn't been there before, the usul of one's given group of Sahaba that he's taking from the first 3 generations were used to deduce, examine, and then extract the ruling for that occasion. But it doesn't negate progress because if we were to say that, then how do we explain that the Gulf is more economically prosperous than the United States and all the other places? How do we explain that?
No.
We don't use that. We don't use that as an argument to say that Islam is the truth because we have more money than you. Because if we
Subhanallah.
wouldn't say that, because, well, look at the Gulf. Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, they got way more money than America and
Indeed.
everyone else. So because of that, Islam must be the truth. The Sultan of Brunei, Sultan of Bukia, look at how much money he's got. He's literally the materially most wealthy man in the world, where he can use his wealth as he wills. Not like Daryl, not like Gates and the others who their wealth is tied up in the company. So what? Because he's the richest in the world, Islam's the truth? No, that's not proof in and of itself. Because if that was true, then the scholars would have used it in the time of another famous rich man from West Africa, probably the richest in history. Right? They would have used it in Mansa Musa's time. Oh, well, look, Mansa Musa is the richest man as far as we know that ever lived. Islam must be the truth. No, when you that's not a leverage of the truth that you're on, because some of the pharaohs of Egypt were extremely prosperous. Ramses II, Ramses IV were extremely prosperous, but that's not proof that the shirk of Egyptian incarnationalism with respect to nature and animism, that's not true. So something being real doesn't mean it's true. Oh, he's really wealthy. That doesn't mean he's upon the truth, though. It just means he's really wealthy. So we don't have an issue with advancement. In fact, I think if a lot of the rulings that the Muraja gave in the Gulf, I think if it wasn't for that, I think some of the advancements that we made would have been hampered. It would have been hampered, because especially with regards to IVF treatment, the use of oil as currency. Say, okay, listen, you can use it like money. There's a lot of machinery that had to happen. The formation of the UAE in 1972 is impossible without the Muraja. It's impossible. How the Sheikh came together and decided to unify, to become one unified country in 72. That's got the fingerprints of Muraja on it. It's impossible without that. But people ignore these types of things and want to live in like dystopian type thinking, or, there's some type of super computer culture ran by women, homosexuals, and maybe Jewish bankers, and there's a shadow realm, and it's just subhanAllah, when they're ignoring the reality around them.
Right, indeed. And I had basically a second to last question. Some people, they also justify these false role models and say, look, they have converted to Islam. But this is actually irrelevant, as they're new and have no knowledge.
This is indeed correct. We have a number of evidences here. When Thumama ibn Uthal converted to Islam, no Sahaba took him as a leader.
Allah.
Because he just converted to Islam. There's no listing of Thumama ibn Uthal ever being put forward as a governor or to lead Salah or as a mufti. Why? Not because he wasn't a good Muslim, but he wasn't a qudwa in Islam to be a leader among people. Just like Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, Sahabi radiallahu anhu. But there's no listing of him being a governor, leading salawat, giving fatwa. Why? Because he was a layman. Same thing with Khalid al-Walid. Everyone's Khalid al-Walid, if not the greatest general radiallahu anhu of history, one of the greatest. Top 5 for me. He's number 1 of the top 5. Right ahead of Rommel. Sometimes I have him tied with Rommel. Okay, 3 is Alexander the Great. Hannibal's 4. Then 5, I go back and forth. So, irrespective of all that, he knew 2 handfuls of surahs, which were from Wadduha to Nas. That's what he knew. Alhamdulillah. 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 But he's not a source of fatwa, though, for any of the groups of Sahaba. He's not a source of fatwa for them. He's not a source of fatwa. And no one uses him, not because he's not trustworthy, not because he's not righteous, not because he's not moral, because he's a layman.
Right.
And the people that are in charge of the Ummah's affairs are supposed to give ruling, he submitted to. That's why when Umar who removed him from the post as leader of the army, he submitted to it. And he moved to Homs and lived out the rest of his life there. He died in Homs. Well, these people are not only are they less than the Sahaba, But since they've entered Islam, they've stayed as they are. And they've actually increased, some of them have increased being how they are. Like they continue to be how they are.
Subhanallah.
So you can't follow these people.
No.
You can't follow them. I'll mention this, and I think it's significant because I made a similar point years ago. I did an article on the blog entitled Malcolm X Not a Role Model. And people, subhanAllah, a lot of Muslim brothers were angry with me.
SubhanAllah.
A lot of Muslim brothers were extremely angry with me because I was trying to warn Muslim brothers that were getting too wrapped up in the resurgence. Because when the Malcolm X movie came out, a lot of Muslim brothers got caught up in that stuff. And there were a lot of Malcolm X converts to Islam based upon just that movie, which I think is bizarre. But I tried to warn people then in 92, 93. And I tried to warn them again this time. Because at the time that Malcolm X died, he hadn't established anything. He wasn't a faqih, he wasn't a mufti. Yes, he was shaheed, inshallah. But he was a common man. And we don't have enough information of him left behind to build anything. So you don't follow him. You don't follow him. He's not a role model to follow because the end result of what he represented, we don't know because we didn't get all of what he would fulfill and become. So you don't follow him. Muslim brothers were really angry with, and they tried to accuse me, obviously, of racism against blacks and things like this. But that aside, they said, because my article right after that was then who is a role model? And I gave an example of an imam right after who was a role model because he gave khutbahs, he led salah, he was involved in handing out zakat al-fitr and food stuff. He was involved in all these great things, and he ultimately was murdered by the police. He owned his own trucking business, right? So he was follow him. Why? Because he has footsteps that you can follow where you can check him against things, and you can also say, oh, look, he reached he reached these thresholds that are capable of being followed. And when you see the picture of him, it's so beautiful because he's wearing the amama, he's wearing the clothes of the sunnah, right? It's like, yeah, that's the deen. That's who you follow, right? He was a great guy. And I personally think, not that it counts for anything, I think that he was probably a wali in his time in the US. The reason for it is he was attempting to mediate between two gangs. And in the course of that mediation, he was shot in the head. But the bullet stopped in his amama. It stopped in his amama. And there are like close to a dozen witnesses of this fact. Okay, he suffered no harm. The bullet was stopped by his amama. So to me, I thought that he was probably a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't have a lot of fanciness about him. He wasn't anything out of the ordinary or crazy. He tried to establish his religion. He was Hanafi in his fiqh. He tried to carry through his obligations, and that was it. There was nothing ostentatious about him. That's somebody, if someone said, I want to kind of pattern my life around him. Okay, well, if you pattern your life after him, you're going to try to open your own business. You're going to try to learn the basics of your method. You're going to try to wear the amama like he had a nice size amama, good looking beard, always in the sunnah. Most of the time he was in the sunnah, right? If you follow that man, he had a family, he had a masjid, he had a few wives and children that he looked after that all have good things to say about him. Well, subhanallah, that's a qudwa then. That would be your city qudwa. If you lived in the same city, that would be your city qudwa. Exactly. Because he lived in a particular, that's your city qudwa. Alhamdulillah. That's so you say, okay, this is my local masjid, and that's my local imam. That's who I follow. Well, alhamdulillah. And zakat al-fitr is being distributed on a regular basis. Yes, you follow him, alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Right? So those are the people that you follow. But the other people that they're not established in the religion, so why are you following them?
Yes, exactly.
They can inspire you. They might inspire you in terms of, wow, look what he was, and look, he's become Muslim. Alhamdulillah. That's great, and that's wonderful. But you wouldn't use them as a role model.
And this is also, I think, where a lot of Muslims in the West have to understand that they cannot follow the establishment clause doctrine here. Islam teaches everything. It's not just worship, it's everything.
Yes, it is a problem for some slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where they say, okay, Islam is to do with my salah, my wudu,
Yeah,
and then everything else I just live.
yeah.
Islam is to do with the four corners of the masjid. That's it.
Mm.
And it's like, no, and unfortunately for you, it's not like that. This isn't Christianity where,
No.
okay, I've taken the Eucharist, I bowed to the altar, I saluted the remonstrance, the priest has
No.
declared my sins are forgiven. Now I head back
SubhanAllah.
out in the world. Let me begin again. No, it doesn't, it doesn't work like that. The
SubhanAllah.
fact of the matter is you're responsible for yourself as a Muslim at all times,
Mhm.
not just when you're in the masjid, not when the khatib is on the minbar, not when you're in the dars, at all times, at all times. And by doing so, you need to make sure that you're around people who also are there, that are making themselves
Mhm.
responsible, and those people inspire you to be better. They inspire you to be better, because those people remind you, because part of what those people are supposed to remind you of is they remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mhm.
Because people mention this, Imam Ahmed said certain people that he looked upon reminded him of Allah,
SubhanAllah.
by meaning to say that they were signs and proofs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
No.
and that the living manifestation of his religion, the ability to carry out the religion, to stand by the religion, they remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm.
That's what that's there for. So those people are there to remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people that have created the artificial crisis of role models, they don't remind you of Allah.
No.
They remind you of the
Exactly.
world,
Exactly.
which is what you would expect, because they're calling to Bacchus and Mammon. So they should remind you of the world.
Mm.
Who's calling to Bacchus and Mammon? That, yeah, he reminds me of Allah. It's impossible.
SubhanAllah.
He reminds you of the world because he's calling to Bacchus, the god of
Oh,
intoxicants, and Mammon, the god of money. If he's not calling to
SubhanAllah.
both, he's calling to one of them. That's what they remind you of. And that's the duo of this time. All the other demigods are feeding off of those two, but those are the two currently right now. Before it was different, but now in this particular time, that's the emphasis now. Before it was three. You had Bacchus, Mammon, and then also the god of pleasures, Aphrodite, love and pleasure. Yeah. Well, this time that's there, but it's more about the false role models are calling more to the wealth and intoxicants than the fornication. Fornication is more a result of those two than anything.
Yes.
Because they believe that you have the right to commit the fornication because you've got your money up, because now you're going to the gym 3 times a week, because that you're a man of high value. Now it's my right that I fornicate. So fornication is sort of a fruit of these things. It's a demigod, whereas the two greater gods of this era are Bacchus and Mammon. Those are the two main ones.
Jazakallah khair, alhamdulillah. This was extremely beneficial. Now, for closing this recording, what I would like you to ask you is the following. For those who need a structure, what do you recommend in regards to adhering to someone, and some books perhaps as well that they can adhere to?
Alhamdulillah. Okay. So when you are thinking about taking on an example, you should have a teacher that possesses the main 5 qualities of a qudwa that we discussed. That's the first order of business. And that teacher, inshallah, should be able to take you through the basic curriculums of foundational creed and your detailed matters, foundational fiqh, your detailed matters, signs of time, tasawwuf, zuhud, ihsan, whatever the case may be that you call it, the foundational and detailed matters. This 4 rings. You should also have knowledge of tajweed and the like. For daily behavior with regards to your activities and polishing your actions as well, outside of the normal teachings you get from a qudwa, I would say you should purchase a reliable copy of Riyadh al-Salihin. Okay. Another text that you can get before then would be the 40 Hadith of Imam Nawawi, reliable copy of that. And also there's another one called the 200 hadith, which are hadith Qudsi. They were done by a brother that I knew. He was in Oregon, and he wanted to have a set of a hadith about the hadith Qudsi to gather them all under one cover
MashaAllah.
and everything else. And he wasn't sure what to do. He was from Arabia. And I said, well, what should I do? And I said, I don't know, because at the time, I'm still starting on my ilm. So he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to gather together all of these, send it to a sheikh and see if it meets the requirements. So he did. And it's Abdul Rahim is his name. He gathered together, it's called the 200 ahadith. So someone should read the 40 hadith from Nawawi, the Khamseen, which has been translated as the compendium. I'd say there's about 30% missing because they didn't do Ibn Rajab's tahqiq and everything else. But it's overall, besides that, it's sound. Most of Ibn Rajab's words they've kept. So the 40 hadith, the compendium, also known as the Khamseen, the 200 hadith, and then the Riyadh al-Salihin. And they should read from those regularly as an amal, because they're the ahadith that don't require a lot of ahkam. They're to do with manners, behavior, things that are agreed upon. And if there is an ikhtilaf, the said authors mention it. The 200 hadith is just flat out ahadith. But those ahadith are mostly touched upon in the Khamseen or Riyadh al-Salihin. And they're the ahadith that anyone can follow and they can take virtue from, and you don't have to have detailed knowledge of ahkam and qiyas and rulings and everything else in order to put them into practice.
And do you also advise a book on Sirah to implement the perfect role model's behavior?
Sirah would be a good example. I would recommend maybe Ash-Shifat to learn about the Rasulullah. Any books that are reliable, that deal with the Sirah in a reliable fashion around the life of the Rasulullah, good character. I'd say also to learn about how to deal with people when it comes to, as I said, eating and drinking and other things. So
yes.
The text that translated by Abu Bakr al-Salihi, the ahadith on hospitality, that would also be a very good example to look at for just reflecting on hospitality, because that book covered, I think it's like 101 ahadith. It not only covered hospitality, but things within hospitality as well, like that what happened, favorite foods of Rasulullah, also how to receive guests when they're going away, when guests don't like a certain type of food, how to deal with food, how long a guest can stay, like how long they can stay, and then the different types of meals, like there's the walima, then there's the madhiyah, there's like all the different things you can be invited to, and the rulings on each one of those. So I thought that might be also a good idea as well, because those are common to all believers and don't require a lot of ahkam knowledge. They're common to all believers.
Do you also recommend the Life and Times of Abu Umar al-Maqdisi?
Yes, that would be good. The only thing I would say is, in trying to implement some of those things, I'd say the believer should work up to it, because some of the things, like he's doing a khatam every week.
Indeed.
And he's reciting a seventh of the Quran between Dhuhr and Asr. It's like, now wait a minute.
Indeed.
If you want to do that, if you said, okay, listen, I want to try to memorize, I want to try to do a khatam of the Quran every week. Okay. If you really were dead set on doing that, you're looking at reciting 5 juz a day. Okay. You could either recite a juz before or after every salah, or you could do 2.5 juz in the morning and then 2.5 at night before you go to bed. Right. Those are possible things you could do. Right. And you could wind up doing a khatam every week. If you said that's too heavy of a burden, I have many obligations. Okay, all right. Then try to do it where it's every 10 days, right? Instead of every 7. That's still a heavy load. What about 30 days? That's a juz a day. Okay. You might have to, so it's a juz a day, and that's 20 pages. You could do some pages in the morning and some in the evening, right? If it's not that, then 60 days, right? 60 days, which is 60 days now, alhamdulillah, it's even less than that. It's 10 pages a day. right? You could do 5 in the morning, 5 in the eve, or something like that, right? Try not to, a lot of scholars say to try not to go longer than that for a khatam, but some scholars have given allowance to say don't go longer than several months. So if you do every 4 months, you do a khatam of the Quran, right? So you do a half a hizb, right? Or once a year, but don't go later than that. Try to complete the Quran, even if it's once a year. This is in addition to Ramadan. This is addition to Ramadan. Some say, well, okay, well, I'll complete it in Ramadan. No, no, no. Once a year where you do like a page a day, or you do some pages a day, to where you complete it every year. Have that as a regular amal. If you can't, oh, well, I can do more than every year. Okay, well, then every 6 months. I can do more. Okay, then every 4 months. Okay, I can do more. Okay, then every 3 months. You do more than that, every 1 month, every 10 days, everywhere. But try to make it a regular habit to do khatam of Quran. Right, and bring the family together like Anas ibn Malik who did in the Hadith in Abu Dawood and Ahmed, where they would have some meal there and they would do the khatam and do dua and hand it out. This is a regular habit, and Anas was one of the last of the companions to die, so he's maintaining the sunnah of Rasulullah. He was there for the great bulk of the great bulk, if not all, the revelation. So him doing a khatam as a regular habit means that it's associated with the sunnah. And he died in Al-Basra, so this is something that should be done as a regular habit.
Thank you for your time, Sheikh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for teaching us. And I give then the final word in closing to you.
In closing, I would say, let everyone focus and stay on the straight and narrow as much as he or she is able. And by doing that, I hope that some of the advices that I gave were at least useful to get you started. I hope that by looking at role models, that the role models that you think about, if you hadn't thought about them before, that you do. And that in looking at those role models, you start to assess, are these the best of people to be followed? Are they the best of who we could find? Are they the utmost of people that we could take a hold of? If not, if they are not, then discard them and start again. If you have people within your household that are a qudwa, or you haven't patched up those relationships, then do so, especially for fathers. They're the progenitor. You have to. That's the progenitor. There's a whole part of you that's missing that you can't activate or access because you're not around that male progenitor. And it's a catastrophe for you until it's resolved. I would give 3 final advices. The first is, everyone has role models. The question is, which ones do you use and which ones are best for you? You must strive to have the best role models, because those role models will keep you on a straight and narrow path, whereas the others take you off the path and take you off the path onto destruction and places that you don't want to be. The second is, understand that when you're taking a qudwa, if you take a bad qudwa, a bad role model, you might not realize it, but other people have you as a role model. And now, because of that bad example, you're now being followed as well. And there's now a chain, a silsila of bad role models that you've started. But if you follow a good role model and you have a good chain, then there's a silsila of good role models. And victory, inshallah, comes from that. The third and final thing is to not allow yourself to get overwhelmed by the spirit of the age or a particular trend. Every time has its trend. For some people, the trend in their time was the Vietnam War, was anti-war. For some people, the trend was the anti-Iraq war. It was the anti-Iraq Afghanistan war. That was the trend, right? Now it's red pill, purple pill, blue pill, black pill, and all the other pills. Okay. Try not to get caught in the spirit of the age, because the spirit of the age is just that. Assess the spirit of the age, assess that trend, critique it, and understand it for what it is, but don't become part of the trend. Because when you do, when that trend falls away, where do you go? Do you fall away? Because another trend will come right behind it. That's the nature of human beings while we're here on the audit before Yom Al-Qiyamah. That's the nature of it. So don't you get caught up in a trend. Understand what it is so that you don't become a victim of it, because trends will take people out of their natural self and destroy them if it's possible and they're not careful. So this is my 3 statements of advice, and I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts good in it. I advise myself and yourselves, inshallah, that some good comes from it.
Inshallah. I do you the honor, Shaykh, to close this recording.
Okay, so we say, Subhanaka Allahumma wa hamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk innahu ghafurur rahim hamid rahim wa la ilaha illa Allah. Wassalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.